Well, Tana and I are so excited to be with our friend, Dr. Mark Hyman. And they're just, my goodness, so many things to say. Mark's a friend. Mm-hmm. He is the co-author with me and Mark and Rick Warren on the Daniel Plan. He is the founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center, the head of strategy and innovation of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. He's a 12-time New York Times best-selling author, board president for clinical affairs for the Institute for Functional Medicine. He's Tana's teacher.
Yeah, been my teacher
he's
for a long time.
Tana's mentor. I read his book, The Ultra Mind Solution, and actually bought it for all the doctors at Amen Clinics. It's really the seed. You know, at Amen Clinics, we have 3 big innovations. It's imaging. If you don't look, you don't know. Natural ways to heal the brain in a functional medicine capacity. That really came from Mark's work. And Mark has a new book, Food Fix, that we're going to get into this week with you. He also has a new public television special and so many things. So, Mark, we adore you. We're glad you're here on the Brain Warriors Way podcast.
Always happy to have you.
Love you guys too. You just keep doing stuff so we can do more together.
Yep. How is this book different? Food Fix from your other food books?
Well, most of my books are really driven out of my clinical practice, which is using functional medicine to heal all sorts of chronic illnesses, whether it's brain issues or metabolic issues. And, talking about food as medicine, all that's really important. But it really is a profoundly different book for me. It's a political book. It's about addressing the food system. Because it occurred to me sitting in my office, seeing patient after patient with chronic illness that was preventable through food and that was caused by food and that could be treated by food. I was like, well, then I better ask why we got the food we got. Because if I don't fix that, I'm just bailing the boat with a big hole in it forever, and it's not going to be very effective. So it occurred to me it was the food system. And then I thought, well, what's causing the food system? Dysfunctional medicine is all about why. Well, it's the food policies. And then what's causing the food policies? It's the food industry and the 187 lobbyists for every member of Congress. So I decided to look down that rabbit hole, and I was shocked at what I found, which is that our food system is the biggest link to so many of our global crises. Clearly chronic disease. 80% of chronic disease is caused by food. It kills 11 million people a year around the world. 6 out of 10 Americans are suffering from it. Our economic crisis, you have a $22 trillion federal debt. And by 2025, half of all of our federal spending that's mandatory will be for Medicare. In 5 years, our Medicare trust fund will run out of money. We're not talking decades or next generation. We're talking like around the corner. And it's terrifying. So the economic crisis. And then, of course, I began to look deeper and go, what about all our social issues? Kids can't learn in school. They have ADD, Daniel and Tana, you've written so much about that and talked about it. Why is that happening? Well, these kids' brains are poisoned by the processed food. How can kids learn on Doritos and soda in the morning? We're 31st in reading and math in the world, right? Vietnam's 21st. Why is that? And also social injustice issues, poverty and racism. There's communities that are targeted by the food industry and are kept down. Even national security, we see, is really threatened because kids are too overweight or unhealthy to fight. And even violence, we see so much divisiveness and violence and behavior issues. And, it's really clear that our food plays a big role in our mood and our behavior. And studies that shocked me the most were the prison studies and studies on kids in juvenile delinquent centers where you swapped out healthy diets for junk food diets and their behavior got better. The violence went down. The aggressiveness, the conflict, the restraints, the suicide. Just from changing your diet. So it really occurred to me that we have to fix the food system. And then, of course, if that's not enough, it's the number one cause of climate change. 50% of our climate change is caused by the food system, the deforestation, soil erosion, factory farming, food waste, a number of things. And the environmental destruction, the loss of fresh water from irrigation, the destruction of soil. We're looking at going to have 60 harvests left of soil. The loss of biodiversity, our pollinator species are dying, which our agriculture depends on. So I was like, gosh, this is terrible. And we got to fix it. And then I started looking further and saying, well, there's a lot of ways to fix it. And people around the world are already innovating. There's a lot of solutions that exist for climate change. Fixing the food and agriculture system is the number one way to fix it. Fixing chronic diseases done through food, fixing our economic issues done through food. So a lot of this book is really about mapping out the problem, but also what are the solutions on an individual level? What can businesses do? What can policymakers do to really turn this around? And that's what I'm super excited about.
Wow. 75% of healthcare spending is spent on chronic preventable illnesses, with most of that being related to our diet.
Yeah, and you got to ask yourself, if we know that, you just said, we know what the solutions are, right? We know what they are. And if we did these things, it would make it better. Why aren't we doing that? And even the food industry, because it's such a big business and they want to make billions of dollars, I get that. But why aren't they jumping on board with this? Because they could make just as much money doing the right thing.
Or actually, it's I was sort of very anti-food industry and really negative and sort of saw them as this monolithic bunch of evil actors who were doing the wrong thing. But, what I've really come to realize is I've got to meet these people, whether it's heads of Cargill or Nestle or Danone or Pepsi. I mean, what I often was very critical of, I'm seeing that their consciousness is changing. They're not bad people. They're just in a legacy of bad things that happened over the history of their companies and need to turn the things around. And then when you see things like, General Mills committing 1 million acres to regenerative agriculture, or you see Nestle and Danone and Unilever and Mars pulling out of the Grocery Manufacturer of America, which is a food industry trade group, because they don't like what they're doing to stop advances in better food policy, and they create the Sustainable Food Policy Alliance. Or in Kellogg's, Kellogg's announced, because of consumer demand, announced they were going to get all the glyphosate out of the supply chain.
Wow.
Meaning Cheerios now have more glyphosate, which is an herbicide, Roundup, than vitamin A or vitamin D. So they're like, well, this isn't a good thing. So they basically are going to get all the glyphosate out of Cheerios and all their food. That's big. So businesses are taking advantage of the trends. The consumer voice matters. What we do matters with our dollars, what we eat, what we buy, and people care about it. And so I think I'm actually very hopeful. I'm in a lot of these meetings around the country of food activists and big companies like Milk and Global Conference, and really seeing how people are thinking differently about this.
That's wild.
So exciting. How can people get involved individually? So I often think, and it's a message that came to me from the Daniel Plan, if you don't live the message, you can't give the message. You have to be authentic. So where do people start?
Well, I think, it's a little overwhelming, right? So people get overwhelmed. What do I do? What can I do? How do I change the political system? And yes, we do need policy change. We do need agricultural change, and we can't all directly affect that. But our voices matter and our choices matter. So I always tell people, start in your kitchen, by choosing real whole foods, by trying to be a vegetarian, for example. Seek out sources of, for example, animal products if you eat those that are regeneratively raised, that are from local farmers markets or community-supported agriculture. Start your own community gardens. Get involved in composting. Get your local town and become more active in your community, whether it's in your workplace or school or faith-based communities. You can be a voice for change. I mean, I've seen mothers go into schools and revolutionize school lunches within school budgets, within school lunch guidelines, and do it effectively because they care.
Right.
You can go to your municipality and say, look, let's do mandatory composting in our community, like San Francisco did. There's mandatory composting. So the more people get active about this, the more they're going to see changes. And I think people can also vote with their vote. I think people are apathetic in this country and feel like their vote doesn't matter, but it does matter. The people who do vote, their vote counts, and that's why we have the system we do. But I think most Americans want a better system. And if we see, 50% of people voting in the last election, which was a huge number, that's terrible in a democracy. We should have 70 or 80% voting like most other democracies. And you can even be active with your local legislators or state legislators or federal legislators, There's a great online resource called foodpolicyaction.org.
Food Policy Action?
Foodpolicyaction.org. And that's a group that it basically rates your senators and congressmen on their food voting records and their ag voting records. And they actually use that to mobilize a whole army to oust 2 congressmen who are in the pocket of big food using social media. So we have way more power than we think if we use it.
I like that.
Well, when we come back, we're going to actually talk about some of the specific things people can do. We'll also talk a little bit about the Daniel Plan, which is something near and dear to all 3 of our hearts.
Yep.
Stay with us.
Yep.
Welcome back. We are having such a good time this week with our friend, Dr. Mark Hyman. This time we're talking about his new book, Food Fix. And it's fascinating because I was thinking, how to fix your kitchen when I first heard the title. But no, this is like much, much bigger. You're talking about fixing the food industry. And if you didn't hear our last podcast, you should go listen to it because he's really going after some big, big policies and big ideas. And we want to talk about how people can get involved. We started touching on that in the last one. So let's continue down that vein. And how can people sort of get involved and what can they take away? What are some practical takeaways from your book?
Well, I talk about, I have an action guide and I just talk about one of the top 20 citizen food fixes and, focus on eating for your health and the health of the planet. And that will have ripple effects.
Right.
And I talk about that as a jokingly the peak and diet, but it will help improve mental health, kicks cognitive and behavioral issues, helps social justice issues. And that's something you can do in your own kitchen, in your own life. And then, make sure when you buy food that you don't buy food that's from in the industrial food system, whether it's glyphosate-ridden soybeans or whether it's high fructose corn syrup or refined soybean oil. Avoid all the additives, chemicals. If you basically don't have it in your kitchen, like azodicarbonamide or butylated hydroxytoluene, you probably shouldn't have it in your food, right? And try to seek out as best you can non-GMO foods and organic foods. It's a little more expensive, but there's great resources on how to do that. And that keeps pushing the demand that changes what the food companies do.
Can you talk just for a minute about genetically modified foods? So many of them are.
Right.
There is such controversy around that. How do you think about GMOs?
Well, that's a great question. So I think there's 2 issues. What is the effect of the gene insertion on the plant that affects human health? And I think there's a lot of concern about that. I think the science is mixed. And I don't think we know when we're
we don't know, right?
Doing a large uncontrolled experiment on humanity. Right. And the 2 genes that are really out there, it's not like a ton. One is the glyphosate-resistant gene, so it's the herbicide-resistant gene, and the other is the BT gene, which is cotton mostly, which is a pesticide-resistant gene. But it's not led to the promises that were made. So there's no greater yields. There's, in fact, an increased use of pesticides and herbicides, not a decreased use with GMO, which we thought would happen. And Europe has not allowed it, and they actually have better yields and less use of chemicals and better outcomes. So from that point of view, I think it's a challenge. It's also, the challenges of it are that it's a kind of agriculture that's inherently destructive and is driving climate change. So just for that reason alone, it's good to avoid it. And the third is what goes on those GMO plants, which is the herbicides and pesticides. And I think there's increasing evidence that glyphosate or the Roundup or the herbicide that's used, the most abundant chemical used in agriculture, is toxic. It's toxic to the microbiome. It affects epigenetic changes. It has been linked to cancer. We just can't be putting this stuff in our bodies willy-nilly without really being concerned about it. So I think those are the issues that we should be worrying about. And I think if you're not getting a GMO food, you're getting food that's grown in a better way. So maybe it even isn't the issue, but if you see a non-GMO label, probably is better for you. And is made from ingredients that aren't from industrial agriculture, which just help you and help the planet. So there's a lot of other things you can do as well. Like I mentioned, the community supported agriculture, the farmers markets, start a garden on your windowsill in your backyard or community garden. Choose restaurants that are more focused on this. There's increasingly, farm-to-table restaurants and regenerative food restaurants. You can be an agent of change in your workplace by encouraging, better practices and getting rid of all the crap. Like at Cleveland Clinic, we got rid of all the soda. Many institutions are really upregulating their quality of their food. There's really simple things. Start a compost pile. Your food waste is a big issue. Most of us throw out our food. Food waste is, 40% of our food is wasted. It's about $2.6 trillion a year. If it would be looking at how much land is required to grow that food we throw out, it would basically be, this entire landmass of China. It's like buying groceries and coming home and throwing 40% of your groceries in the garbage. And it's harmful, not just because it's a waste of resources, it actually causes climate change when it goes to landfills and off gas. So if it were a country, like I said, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China. So that really matters. There's nothing we can do. And then like I said, turn up the heat on food companies, turn up the heat on politicians. People make a difference. People care, whether it's ballot initiatives or donate to the right campaigns or lobby with your local representatives to shift policies that you think are important, and use the food policy action website to learn about things. And maybe you want to get involved in regenerative agriculture in your community. Maybe you want to learn more about it. You can become educated, watch films like Kiss the Ground and The Biggest Little Farm and people doing a big difference. And there's even companies where you can invest your money. So a lot of the times, we're talking about harm that we're doing to the climate through investments. And the biggest venture hedge fund, I think it was Blackstone or Black something. I don't know, I'm not a big money guy, so I don't know, but it was like one of the biggest money managers in the world. They said, we're not going to invest anything that actually causes climate change, which is huge.
Interesting.
And I think, you can support those businesses that are doing those good things and switching that out. So I think those are all things that we can do as individuals. And of course, we can demand different kinds of healthcare where we activate our policymakers to talk about food, and including food as medicine as their strategies to pay for things that really work, like dietary interventions, which we don't know.
Well, speaking of that, you and I really bonded over the Daniel Plan. So we knew each other before then, but when Pastor Rick Warren called us and said, I'm fat, my church is fat, will you help us? Back in 2010, we created the Daniel Plan to really get the world healthy through churches. And I know you've personally been involved in launching it in many different places. Talk about the impact you've seen from, which I just think is a great model on how organizations can get involved in the health of the people they serve.
Absolutely. It's fascinating is that, we did this whole thing in Cleveland, then we worked to create together, the 6-week program, the year-long curriculum. It's all digital. It provides information for pastors and their sermons. It provides small group study guides and videos on how to do it. And we were all part of creating that. And it's this incredible body of work that is so powerful that it can be scaled across organizations and churches. And actually, in fact, we have 27 churches in Cleveland where we've implemented the Daniel Plan with over 1,600 participants. And we're doing research on that. Like we wanted to do, remember Daniel? It's hard to convince a church to do research. Now they got the Cleveland Clinic involved. We got better luck with that. But it's incredible to see the results people have and the power of love and community. And I call it love medicine. Food is medicine, but love is medicine. And that was sort of the secret sauce of the Daniel Plan, was as people loved each other well. And I think that's a missing ingredient in how we change behavior. Because I could talk all day about what to eat, and you could too. And whether people do it or not, that's the problem. So how do you get people to change behavior? It's really through the power of community and friend power. And I think that's what's so great about the Daniel Plan. But we're doing that in the Cleveland Clinic. I think I told you, Daniel, we created something called Functioning for Life, which is a functional medicine group program, kind of like the Daniel Plan. that's driven off of, the same intellectual property of like food is medicine. And we're seeing incredible results. Just remarkable stuff. And we're doing research on every single patient. So we're looking at outcomes and staggering the benefits we're seeing. And yet, people just don't take advantage of that.
And what I loved was the small groups. These people had an automatic built-in accountability and support. And so when you're trying to do it by yourself, it's a lot easier. You don't have that kind of accountability and support. But with a group, when they didn't know what to do, they had someone to reach out to. When they were going to go off or they felt guilty, or all of the challenges that come up, they just had their group right there. And I think that was one of the big reasons they made it.
Well, and for people that don't know, it's really based on 5 pillars. It's faith, which is basically why do you care? Food, fitness, focus, which was really brain health, and friends. We get better together or we get sick together.
People are contagious.
And that's where, the fastest way to get healthy is find the healthiest person you can stand and then spend as much time around him or her as possible.
I love that. It's so true. Like if your friends are all eating crap and sitting on the couch, binging on donuts and
beer and chips, you're more likely to do that.
Pizza, you're gonna not be so healthy. But all of your friends are drinking green juices and having yoga. Like when I went to your house and stayed there, it was amazing. I got like green smoothies and I got like all kinds of nut balls and give me like a whole lunch pack with like my mother. It was awesome. It was I didn't have to like be in some strange city and eat crap. I had like a little Hyman care package. The best.
The nut balls.
I still remember that like it was yesterday.
Well, you're welcome anytime. So during the Super Bowl this year, rather than watch football, I looked at my database. So I have this crazy database of 160,000 scans.
But you got to talk. If you're doing that on a Sunday night, you got to talk.
But it was really interesting. You'll like the study. I have BMIs on 20,038 patients and their scans. And there was a linear correlation in virtually all areas of the brain that as their weight went up, the function of virtually every area of the brain went down from normal weight, overweight, obese, morbidly obese. Was horrifying. And given that 72% of us are overweight, 40% of us are obese, just like you're saying, this is the biggest brain drain in the history of the world because we've exported it to every other country virtually. So if we don't get a handle on this, we're going to decrease the lifespan of our children and our grandchildren. All right, when we come back.
Before you go off of that, I just want to sort of emphasize because, what you do is so important, Daniel, because you connect the dots between, food and the brain and obesity in the brain. But what's really clear is that so many of our bad decisions are a result of bad brain function and poor choices. And it's leading to this epidemic of mental illness that's connected to food, of divisiveness in our society. What is all this conflict? I never remember all this when I was growing up. People hating each other. Agree. It's just like it's just like we live in a civil war in America. And all of that, and I think not only from the food, obviously, but a large part of it has to do with how screwed up the brain is from the food. Yeah. Our David Perlmutter just wrote a book called Brainwashed. Fascinating about how he says the limbic system, which is the fight or flight, reptile in the room, and the frontal lobe, which is the adult in the room, are not talking to each other because the inflammation from our diet. And that's just scared the crap out of me because I'm like, no wonder we're having so much mental health issues. And in terms of chronic disease, in terms of quality of years of life lost, it's a far bigger burden to society in terms of the economic impact than things like diabetes or heart disease, even though those cause more death. It's like the people's not being able to function, being depressed,
That's right. And your brain controls everything. And when you damage it, so we'll talk more about that when we come back. Stay with us. We're here with Dr. Mark Hyman. We're talking about his new book, Food Fix, but also some of the other amazing things Mark is doing in the world. Stay with us.
I was so surprised that I actually did have an injury to my brain. 5 years ago, I was driving and I saw a light behind me, and then boom, the semi-truck hit me from behind. My car basically turned into a pop can. The hospital thought I was fine, so they just sent me out the door with painkillers. But the next day, I had horrible pain in my head, horrible headaches. I pulled away from all family, all friends, and I didn't know why. I ended up thinking, am I crazy? Is it me? Am I making this up in my head? Why am I depressed? Why am I falling down this deep, dark, lonely hole? Am I alone? I had a friend tell me about Hyman Clinics, and he said, go in and see how it goes. Let them scan your brain.
At Hyman Clinics, we're creating a revolution in psychiatry. All other medical specialists look at the organ they treat before they treat it, but most psychiatrists never look and end up guessing based on whatever symptoms you tell them. But how do you know unless you look? Brain SPECT imaging gives us a new way to look at your brain, to understand and treat your symptoms so you can ultimately know what is going on and feel better.
The SPECT scan showed me that it's not in my head, it's in my brain. You can see right on the scan. He pointed out exactly where the injuries were. It was amazing to see. It's a relief to be able to show my family the scans and say, look guys, this is real. I felt hopeful, extremely motivated. I felt like the old me is finally going to come back.
Welcome back. We are here with our friend, Dr. Mark Hyman. His new book is Food Fix, but it's way bigger than a book. It's how do we fix the food crisis that is damaging the brain, body, health of the world, not just America, but also damaging our minds. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in the body. It's only 2% of your body's weight, but it uses 20 to 30% of the calories you consume. And if you consume an inflammatory diet filled with toxins, you're not going to be thinking in a way that really helps you. And Mark, in the last podcast, you were beginning to talk about how our food is damaging our brain, which then damages our decision making, which then spills over to our relationships, our ability to manage our money, even to the divisive political climate that we find ourselves. And when world-class athletes go to the White House and are fed fast food, I don't know, I have a problem with that. It's just bad modeling to have the pizza boxes for our world-class athletes. Because, you know, they're not world-class athletes today because they're eating crappy food that, you know, often they have nutritionists that are really helping them. We just have to be better models for the country at large.
It's so true. And I think I'm just so struck in a whole section of my book called Food Society about how behavior and mental health, how academic performance is all linked to food. And the data, you know, you and I were doing this decades ago and everybody kind of laughed at us, but, you know, there's a whole new field of nutritional psychiatry and how our overall diet quality with high sugar loads and nutritional deficiencies, things like omega-3, zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, B vitamins, all drive mental illness. And these are what people are deficient in, you know, and I think that, you know, we see these studies, and the studies that most strike me in terms of the effect on behavior and the brain are these prison studies, because it's easy to sort of do a study if you have a controlled environment, and in food it's almost impossible because people eat what they want. You can't control the diet. You give them food, so lock them up. You actually can see what happens. And just simple interventions like giving in prison a randomized controlled trial, prisoners omega-3 fats and a multivitamin reduce violent crime by 37%.
So makes sense.
And the author of the study said, this was amazing. He said, having a bad diet is now a better predictor of future violence than past violent behavior. And likewise, a diagnosis of psychopathy, generally perceived as being a better predictor of a criminal past, is miles behind what you can predict just from looking at what a person eats.
I actually read one study. Tell me if you've heard of this study where they found that by doing very similar thing, splitting up the population, feeding one a really healthy diet, that was actually fairly not over the top crazy. Like we can get a little like extreme with some of the things we think like other people think of them as extreme. We think of them as normal, but they just did sort of a normal cleanup.
Like vegetables and fruit.
So they did sort of a cleanup on the diet, and the other half they let them continue with their diet. And not only did they see the violence decrease with the group that ate the healthy diet, but like you were just sort of alluding to, they saw 21% decrease in recidivism. So I just thought that was amazing.
But yet they give them 88 cents a day to feed the prison population.
Which is insane.
And it's like, so how do you do this on a budget?
Yeah, well, I think it's possible. I think it's very possible because, I think the myth that it's expensive to eat well is a myth. Yes, if you're going to eat heirloom variety of everything.
That's what I mean.
Grass-fed, regenerative everything, it can get expensive. But if you're eating just real food, and getting out the junk as the first step, that's powerful. Yeah. And in this one experiment of 3,000 youth that were incarcerated, they replaced the snack food and junk food and the refined food and sugar over 12 months. There was a 21% reduction in antisocial behavior, a 25% reduction in assaults, and a 75% reduction in the use of restraints, and 100% reduction in suicides. And that is striking because suicide is the third leading cause of death in teenagers, and it's increased 33% in the last decade or so. So that is just a striking thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and think about it. Suicide's gone up 33% since 1999, while cancer has declined 27%. Why? It's because we're working on the wrong paradigm. A pill for every ill, I got that from you, making diagnoses based on symptom clusters and then medicating these people and never once talking to them about their diet. That's insane that we need to just do this in a completely different way because every other field of medicine, their outcomes have improved since the 1950s. But psychiatry, because we just have the wrong paradigm. And there's this great study from Australia where they looked at 2 outer islands. One of them had fast food restaurants. The other one didn't. The island, and then they measured their omega-3 fatty acid index and the level of depression. And the fast food group had significantly lower levels of omega-3 fatty acids and 5 times the level of depression. It's the food.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, there's one study I quote in the book, which was shocking to me because it was sort of an objective brain mapping study where they looked at EEG function before and after just 13 weeks of supplementation with a multivitamin. And the violent acts reduced by 91% compared to the control group.
Oh, wow.
And the kids who were measured were deficient in iron, magnesium, B12, and folate, all needed for great brain function. When they looked at the EEG, their brain waves, they found major decrease in abnormal brain function after just 13 weeks of supplementation, which is amazing. It's amazing.
But yeah, you're in an academic institution, and still a lot of physicians, when you talk about supplementation, go, there's no science, there's no research behind that. It's nothing
Expensive
more
urine.
than expensive urine.
If you ask them what they do, I'll take them. Actually, we did a survey when I got here. We did a survey when I got here, which was shocked the heck out of me, which we wanted to see, what was the utilization in the clinic of supplements? What percent of and this is a major academic, sophisticated organization, what percent recommended supplements to their patients? Guess the number.
10? 20?
70% of the Cleveland Clinic doctors recommend supplements to their patients.
Oh.
Whether prenatals or vitamin D or fish oil or B vitamin, whatever. It was like orthopedic surgeons. It's like and it's not just here, but we know this data from other surveys that 70-80% of doctors are recommending supplements, but they are sending people to CVS or wherever. They're not getting the kind of quality that you guys make, or it's available from other professional brands.
Right. Interesting. So that's interesting.
So what do you think most people should take?
Oh, well, I think, clearly the major deficiencies are omega-3s, magnesium, zinc, often iron, the B vitamins like folate, B12, B6. So those are, you can get those if you take a multivitamin and mineral, a fish oil, a vitamin D, maybe a little extra magnesium. I think that's a bare minimum for most people.
What about a probiotic?
I would add that in there. I think the probiotics research, more and more on research on that, but I think it's pretty exciting to see, the advances in the microbiome and what we're learning. And I think we're just sort of at the infancy. So, I think we'll learn more and more.
Yeah. Those are my 5 go-tos too. Everyone sort of needs those basics.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about specific things you can do to fix your food and help Dr. Hyman fix the food of America and beyond. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. We are here with our dear friend, Dr. Mark Hyman, and he's very excited about changing the world.
Audacious.
It's one of the reasons we love him.
Good.
And let's talk about what people can do individually to begin to get this country going in the right direction rather than the wrong direction, which we're clearly headed in now.
Yeah, I think awareness is really important in education. And I can tell you that even someone like me, and even you guys, a lot of this stuff is shocking and was new for me. The way in which our food system is broken, the way in which it's contributing to so many of our issues of health and economic woes, climate change, and lots more. And I think, becoming aware of how these are connected is important. So my book is a great resource, Food Fix, but I think there's a lot of other great things you can learn from. So being educated is really important. And then the second piece is think about what you can do as an individual to change your habits, your diet, your choices, your things. And we talked about this in the last segment, which is, things like learning about regenerative agriculture and how do you buy more foods that are going to be adding to the solution instead of harming the planet and harming health. How do you become more politically active? How do you become active in your local community organizations, churches, schools, workplaces, etc.? How do you start a compost pile, a community garden? These are all things you can do. But I also think that people have to understand that this is going to take time, but your voice really matters, and you can do something about it. And that we think an individual doesn't really matter, but my friend Vani Hari, who's a sort of a food activist, sort of got up in arms about all the chemicals in our food and, how Starbucks caramel matcha latte or whatever has some toxic caramel, carcinogen, and she outed them. And she basically shames these big companies into changing, and they change.
That's so funny.
So use your voice. And then we have some tips here. Avoid anything with ingredients that are difficult to pronounce.
Yeah.
Anything that didn't exist in your grandmother's day, maybe even your great-grandmother's day, depending on how old you are.
Yeah.
Avoid anything containing soybean oil. Americans now get almost 10% of their calories from refined soybean oil, which is one of the most abundant sources of the pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids.
Yeah, I mean, you guys focus on the brain, but work by scientists at the NIH showed that, and these are correlation studies, but that as this oil consumption went up, like 1,000% of the refined oils, and the omega-3s went down, and the ratio got worse, that there was increased violence, homicide, and suicide as a result of these increasing in refined oils in our diet. So there's a lot of things you can do as individuals, and I think it's important for people even to get politically involved a little bit. Vote for the right people, get out there and talk about these things and learn and educate yourself.
And people are at different levels of their education with food and their journey with food. And I mean, for some people, it's going to be cleaning out their pantry and working on themselves. For some people, maybe the next step is getting your house healthy. For some people, maybe the next step is going to your school and working on the school or your place of work. And I mean, it feels like you could just grow this bigger, but it starts with you. I mean, that's what it seems like to me, is it's got to start with you until it feels comfortable to move to that next level when you understand it well enough.
Yeah,
because it feels overwhelming otherwise.
But it starts with you, and then it's your circle wherever you go. I mean, just getting your church to do the Daniel Plan is something that both you and I have had lots of people. I actually get recognized more for the Daniel Plan than public television. It's like, oh, Dr. Hyman, I love you. I love Dr. Hyman. Our church did the program. It was so grateful. So start wherever you are.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, when you eat better, your relationships will be better. People will actually like you more. Your skin will be better.
Energy.
You'll smile more, and so on. One of our biggest blogs recently, it just blew up and went viral, was on red dye number 40.
Really?
Which it just went pop for who knows what reason. I have a scan on and off red dye number 40, and it just caused these explosions of inflammation in the brain. Talk a little bit about food additives, food colors, food preservatives.
Sure. So, the FDA's job is to sort of regulate the safety of our food, and they developed a certifications called GRAS, which are generally recognized as safe. But a lot of things are grandfathered in, and most of those things, there's 10,000 chemicals in our food. Very few of them have been actually tested for safety. And the way the government works is until it's proven to be harmful, it's allowed in the food, whether it was trans fats or glyphosate or whatever. And in many other countries, they're much more rigorous about this. So the FDA allows so many things in our food supply that are banned in other countries, like azodicarbonamide, which is yoga mat material that Vani Hari outed in Subway, the Subway bread.
Yep.
And so, for example, it's still in Singapore, if you use it as a food menu, you get a $450,000 fine and 15 years in jail for using this food additive. And we allow BHT and BHA and BPA and all these noxious chemicals that have been shown to cause harm in humans and animals. And the government just lets them slide, partly because the food industry is so powerful. I mean, we knew for decades that trans fats were killing people and that they didn't change the law.
So why would the scientists at the FDA not be like the commissions in Europe that ban way more? I mean, it seems like unless you've proven it to be safe, you shouldn't have it in the food. But it seems like we're backwards. Unless you prove it's dangerous, you don't.
Right. We don't follow the precautionary principle. Right. And what's fascinating is that there was so much lobbying against this that there were over 100 petitions. There was something called the Ban of Poisonous Additives Act of 2009, which would have ended BPA in children's food and drink containers. It's a synthetic hormone that mimics estrogen. It's been linked to cancer, obesity. And the food industry would sort of screw them up if they did this. But the American Beverage Association filed 80 different lobbying reports related to 24 bills in Congress And the one it influenced most was the BPA, the Banned Poisonous Additives Act, and it failed. I mean, the act didn't get passed, and our children and our communities are not being protected. So when you think about that amount of money, I mean, it's huge. You've got, just in 2015, there were literally probably 100 plus food companies that spent $200 million, about 192 million, almost $200 million, lobbying against the GMO Labeling Act, which is why we don't have national labeling. In fact, it was so bad that Vermont and a few other states had mandatory labeling. The federal bill overruled those states, and now they don't have to have mandatory labeling. And it's because they spent $200 million in 1 year. I mean, how do you fight that,
Crazy.
Well, you fight it. I mean, you have to go up against these people. Otherwise, I don't know if this is your experience. I bet it is. I have never, in my 40 years of clinical practice, seen the low levels of testosterone in young boys, in young teenagers, and in adult males. And I think it's all the hormone disruptors that are in our food and in the personal products people are putting on their bodies, that you have to read the labels and get rid of that stuff, or you're not going to have the energy. Because hormone, testosterone is not just involved in sex, it's involved in memory and mood
Drive.
and motivation. And when it's low, people get depressed. And almost all of my NFL players, we've done 300 NFL players now, have low testosterone. And it's like, well, how's that possible? These giant, virile...
Belly fat, though, right?
Yep.
It's just
Because after they stop
crazy.
playing, especially.
Well, it's that, but I think it's also the toxins in the food.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to stop. But Food Fix is Dr. Mark Hyman's new book. He has many books that I just love. He also has a new special on public television. Check your local listings. I can't tell you, Mark, how grateful we are.
Thank you for
to
being
be
my
your
mentor
friends and the good you're doing in the world.
Yeah.
We admire you greatly.
Thank you. People can go to foodfixbook.com. They can get a free action guide on there. They can get a free video on 5 steps to healthier you and a planet. There's a whole great bonuses and stuff for the book. So people can go to foodfixbook.com and learn more about it.
Oh, wonderful. Excellent.
Great.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you,
my friend.
guys.
All right. Take care.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Hyman Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at HymanClinics.com, or a 10% discount on all supplements at BrainMDHealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.